Hey, folks, welcome to Affiliate Nerd Out. I am your nerderator, Dustin House, spreading that good word about affiliate marketing. And today, my guest, Sam Katz, over at Crowdwork Media, founder over there. Welcome to the Nerdatorium, Sam.
It's a pleasure to be in the Nerdatorium. It's my first time, and I'm very excited to look around.
Awesome. And you and I don't have a long history together, but we met at PI Live, instantly hit it off, and hung out and nerded out about influencer marketing and the like. So happy you could make some time to be here today, bud.
Oh, thanks for having me. And it's true, we don't have a long history, but I feel like our conversations have covered a lot of ground, and it
Yes.
got us to this point. So I'm excited to keep it going.
It did. It escalated quickly, and you've already got a LinkedIn user. Somebody's in the fan group giving you a woot here. Awesome. If you would like to be in Sam's seat, combine being my guest, go to dustinhouse.com/nerd. Put in an application and a topic, whatever you want to nerd about. I'm open to it. But our question of the day today is going to be, what level of influencers are brands working with out there? I'd love to hear if it's micro, if it's macro. Just drop a comment in the chat box and tell me. But without further ado, Sam, who are you?
It's an existential question, but I'm Sam Katz. I shouldn't always admit this, but I'm an agency person through and through at this point. And
Uh-huh.
most recently, I founded Crowdwork Media, which is a talent and influencer marketing agency focused on lifestyle, athletes, entertainers, and comedians.
Wow, I thought you would go with hobby guitarist, or like in some kind of sense. Like I wanted to see who Sam really
uh,
was. I mean, I know you own a an agency, but like, who are you really? Like,
we
where
can
do you come from this?
We could go deeper into that. I'm someone that doesn't do well with being bored or static. So I tend to have a lot of hobbies. I'm a retired soccer player, played a little bit
Ooh,
in college and a little bit afterwards. The ukuleles behind me are a symbol of my middle of the pack or lack of talent in the music space, but it's a fun, easy instrument, four strings. I got hurt one season and picked it up, and
okay.
it's my therapy and all that. But I still play a lot of soccer, a lot of basketball when I'm not doing this whole influencer marketing thing.
Good, good. Staying active. That's good. And tell us about Credwork Media. What do you do and who do you serve out there?
Yeah, absolutely. We first and foremost are a talent agency for some of the biggest up and coming, what I call lifestyle athlete creators. Lifestyle athletes to me are athletes who do not get paid for being good at their sport necessarily. So all of my athletes happen to be really good at what they do, but they are engaged with, people follow them because of their ability to create fantastic content and kind of showcase their lifestyle in a unique way. So we have a roller skater who skates through the streets of Manhattan. He generates crazy views and crazy numbers, but super fun to just follow along and watch. And then a couple runners in the space. So been a part of different marathons, different health programs, and just building from that.
All right, awesome. And you're meeting these, what would you call them? Clients.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, how are you coming across these folks?
It's a really good question. It's the first. I think the hardest one is the first one. Like, where do you start? As
Hmm.
someone that wasn't a talent manager for years, that part was always that was always an interesting aspect of like, how am I going to get my first client? I'm not a talent
Okay.
manager now. Um, Luckily, I have a friend who worked at a PR agency, and she was like, "Hey, I'm helping this guy with managing his contracts, and I have my own job. And I hear you do talent management. Is that correct?" And I
Okay.
said, "Yes."
Sure.
And so she introduced us. We had a couple meetings and was able to sign my first client about 8 months ago today, which
Okay.
was really fun. And we've done some serious business together, which has been super fulfilling in the last 8 months. He's then introduced me to other people in his community and other athletes. And then the other way I've met influencers to work with is I've gotten the chance to work with some really cool brands
Okay.
and helping them with their influencer marketing. And I tend to put people on those lists and incorporate ones that I'm fans of. And not, they still have to fit the brand, of course, but I've met them by adding value to their life, of hopefully bringing them a brand deal to start and just starting a relationship sort of the old fashioned way of, hey, you seem interesting. Let's keep this conversation going.
Well, that's smart and a great way to network and be opportunistic in this space. And it sounds like you're just getting started with this whole entrepreneur journey, huh?
Yeah, pretty new to it. I'd say about a year and a half into being a full-time entrepreneur. And I think people often ask, like, are you having fun? Which is a it's a nuanced answer, which is like yes and no at the same time. But on the whole, it has been super fulfilling to like be pursuing this. It's something I thought about for a really long time and finally had the opportunity to do it.
Well, that's great, and it's great that you can make money at something that you're actually enjoying, and I find the most fulfilling part of being in the agency and consultant space is the networking capacity, and I'm always thinking about what I'm doing next, and who's that next client going to be? Who am I going to be able to give the most value to, essentially? And it sounds like you've got a really nice niche and vertical that you're attacking here, which is, in my opinion, pretty underserved in the affiliate influencer community.
It's wild. I mean, even if you zoom out and look at the whole athlete space, from NBA players all the way down to even high school players now with NIL, the space is wide open. And there's, if you think the influencer marketing space is the wild wild west, specifically working with athletes is like
Hmm.
even more so, where things are just being figured out. So how do you work with a college athlete? How do you work with a college team?
Hmm.
What should these athletes be thinking about for their brand today, but also moving forward, kind of thing, where maybe you play cornhole and you're not going to make a $5 million contract being a cornhole player, but maybe you make $5 million from the brands that you're working with. So suddenly being a professional cornhole player is a little bit more appealing, or
Yeah.
something of the sort.
I can play some cornhole. That would be my secondary s- sport to like pick a ball at this point. Like I can play some cornhole.
There we go.
Kristen Big Time Evans jumping in saying, "Are you having fun?" is the most loaded entrepreneur question. Yeah.
Agreed.
How are you supposed to answer that in this day? Like, no,
Uh,
like this gets to be work at some point. Yes, it was fun at some point, but like it's a weird life that we're in that space.
Yeah, not to get too deep down like the wrong rabbit hole, but like I think deciding to be an entrepreneur requires a little bit of like masochism and a little bit of like ego, or a lot of bit of ego, to be like, you know what, the world needs another idea and I've got that idea. That requires a little bit of ego to think, why should anyone listen to me, or do I have any good ideas? And then the masochist part, I'm joking half half, but like, it's very different to have your own thing that is driven by you versus showing up for a job, which is also takes a lot of work and certainly some pain, but I think it's just
Yeah.
different.
Well, speaking of that work, let's talk about your process. So you're working with these clients that are athletes that need help with like finding brands that are going to match their
Yep.
lifestyle and attitude and influence. Can you tell us about like your process here?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I may reference a couple times throughout this call, but there's a ton of, we'll call them, issues in the influencer marketing space,
Okay.
particularly on the creator side. And one aspect of that is the operation side of working with brands. So there's one part, everyone wants sales. Everyone wants,
Hmm.
can you bring me more brand deals as a manager? And the
Okay.
short answer is yes, of course. We have relationships, we've worked with brands in the past, and I know how to pitch talent and sort of put it in the line items necessary to work with a brand, to work with an agency. But I find myself, a lot of my time is spent helping the creators with managing the operations side of it, which means, what's the creative brief? What are my timelines, not just for this project, but when does my exclusivity period end? And when can I start working with these types of brands? So part of my job has been putting in place simple and easy to use tech, in one aspect, but also just being a constant communicator with my creators to check in. Like, actually having a personal relationship with them has been helpful to me. I don't believe in I believe in not running from the fight. Like, how do I show up, give my creator good news, give my creator bad news? I want
Hmm.
to lead with overtly transparency when it comes to my
Great.
overt transparency when I'm working on their brand deals, working on their operation side of things. And then ultimately, how can I help them build their business, which could be brand deal related. It could be they want to start their own brand. Maybe they want to become a speaker at different events, or maybe it's all three.
Okay, awesome. That's a interesting mode. An interesting spot to be in. I love the transparency. I don't do anything else in my life besides full transparency with
Yeah, right.
everybody I play with. So, love that sentiment. Something I've got to bring up here, like traditionally, influencer agencies can be tough to work with. I don't know if you've ever heard this concept or like there's the negative connotation behind it, but like when I personally an affiliate manager of a brand and I'm reaching out to an influencer and I get an agency, my eyes instantly roll like, oh, now we have a tough conversation. Uh, can you tell us why that is in this realm?
Yeah, and there's a couple ways I think that I can answer that question. I think for one, there is a lack of education and experience in this space. For example, I've only been a talent manager for 8 months, and we're already thrown into conversations. However, on the back end of that, I was on the other side working at the
Okay.
casting agencies. So my job was to talk to the talent managers, and probably spoke to 500 a week at my last job. So I kind of had a good sense of how that flow and conversation goes.
Hmm.
But I think sometimes you may be dealing with a person who doesn't have the necessary experience to really understand the full sort of view of what's at stake here. That's no blame. That's just sort of a simple fact. I think the
Yeah.
other aspect is it's more of an industry issue, which is this influencer space has become extremely transactional, which is inherently the opposite of what influencer marketing should be, which is partnership, strategic, long term. There's room to optimize and sort of grow that. Whereas now the current sort of flow of influencer marketing, whether it's influencer agency or manager or brand, is it's very much like we have a campaign, you must respond in 24 hours. Please let us know your rates, or we're on to the next one.
Yeah.
So when you get in that process and flow, no matter what side of it you're on, I think it one teaches the wrong way to go about it, but two, you
Okay.
you also just have to get done what you need to get done. So that's one side of it. The other thing is like talent managers, we get paid usually off of commission. So I think a
Hmm.
lot of talent managers, they're thinking about how can I make money, not what is best for my client. And
For sure.
sometimes the free campaign might be a really good way to start off a relationship with a brand that could lead to future dollars. But again, if there were people above me, man, looking at what kind of numbers did you do this month, and I came back with, we did a bunch of gifting campaigns, I'm going to get in trouble as the manager.
Yeah.
So I think that's an aspect too, but I would put that more on the industry versus like the people in each spot.
Yeah. And going through your process, like when you get started with an influencer and they don't have a lot of experience with like gifting, sponsorships, and affiliate in specific, because that's the most difficult to teach, right? But
Yeah.
what is do you get started in the affiliate realm to like get some case studies rolling so you can really showcase what they can do for a brand?
Absolutely. I've been urging my creators, and they're very interested in doing this. Is how could we find different ways to show that when you do something, people take action, your
Hmm.
audience takes action, and of course, the gold standard there is if I talk about this, will people buy? And then we want to report that back to the brands and use that in collateral.
Hmm.
I think it comes down to a couple of things, but like confidence is a big one, where some creators are not confident that they're going to sell a ton of things, which is okay.
Okay.
They've never done it before. They do need to try it and see what works. And the second piece of that is they're nervous of creating, they don't want to create advertisements. And I think a lot of times what some of these deals call for, or the brief will call for, is like, please create an advertisement on your page for this brand, which again goes against the reason of why you should be working with this person. Um, Being an agency brand person, I understand that there's certain things that you cannot change in a creative brief from a legal standpoint when you're working with brands. So I get that stuff. Um, I just think that holds back a little bit the idea of like turning it into an acquisition channel.
Mm. I hear you. And it's so good that you have both perspectives. You've worked with brands and you know what they're going through. Like that's a very important capacity in the affiliate realm is like try being an affiliate yourself and see how hard this is. It's
Yeah,
brutal world out there until you like really gain steam.
super difficult. I mean, and the group that's done it the best are the mommy bloggers, for lack of a better word, is, they have an audience that's totally engaged with the things that they're buying for their
Mhm.
families, for their homes, for their kids. And I think they are the gold standard to look at
Hmm.
affiliate marketing because they're crushing it.
Yeah, they're if you're doing it right, absolutely. And so let's get into our topic of the day. That's the true value of an influencer's audience. Like, in your opinion, how do you measure something like this?
It's a great question. There's a ton of ways to do this. The thing that has come up often is what is the value of the influencers of investing in influencer content or
Okay.
content in general. This answers the audience question, but to me, the value of investing in content and creators is to learn about new potential audiences that you can integrate into. So what I mean by that is instead of running an ad towards, men 30 to 40 who love soccer, you can find these creators who are already in those communities, work with them to understand what type of content would resonate best with their audience, and then gain insight into what matters most to that audience in regards to your brand. So it's a new way of just gaining those understandings of what will truly work in this community, in this marketplace. That's one.
Okay. Gotcha. And with that, like I think there's like some questions about, defining what kind of influencers levels that are out there. And do
Mm,
you believe in like the micro, the nano, the macro? I don't know how to define these exactly, if they're number bound, if they're engagement bound. What are your thoughts on these kinds of levels?
yeah, everyone has a different definition of where
Okay.
these break out, but I think everyone kind of has the same understanding of what these categories mean, right? Like a nano creator, someone with a smaller audience, perhaps under 5 to 10,000 followers.
Okay.
A micro might be between 15 and 50,000 followers, and a macro is above that,
Okay.
up until maybe a million, and then you get into celebrity. But again, people have different definitions.
Yeah.
Each group, there is no blanket pricing. There are no blanket rules for each level because at the end of the day, these are people who play in all different industries. It is very different than saying the Screen Actors Guild, where you're paying actors or actresses to be in movies, so there's a certain bankability associated with that sector. When it comes to creators, you can have a CEO with 5,000 followers, and 4,000 of them are other CEOs of other tech platforms, so on
Yeah.
and so forth. Would you value that more than the 20,000 follower, we'll call it, I'm I make pens and like people follow me for these pens. Like, I don't know, it depends on your brand. So I think going back to the audience question, is it really is important to understand what is the value of why are we working with this creator? Who are we going to be reaching? What's the message we're going to be using in that? And what can we learn from them by working with these different creators? Now, when it comes to size, I don't think it 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 has importance and it should
Hmm.
be very much involved with your strategy, but there is no this is better or this is better. As
Okay.
always, it depends, and I think a mix of all, uh, when working together, is truly the right solution. So how
Yeah.
do you use a up top celebrity macro creator and then use a bunch of nano and micros to almost like integrate with that messaging, and all of a sudden it feels like, why is everyone talking about, this one product or this sort of service right now?
Yeah, and you brought up a great point about an engaged audience of 5,000 that is right in your wheelhouse for what your product does. It's can be so much better than uh, a mega superstar celebrity that doesn't have that audience. And like picking and choosing which ones to invest in is going to be a sometimes an easy decision, but sometimes not. Like from the brand perspective, like where do you finding the most bang for your buck essentially for ROI?
It's a great question. I'm sorry to hit you with the, consultant's response, but it really does depend. If my goal is diversity of content and testing new audiences, I want to work with 10 micro nano creators who are all going to create multiple pieces of content. It's going to be very much diversified across what they create, even if they're all in the same space. And the reach, let's say reach is all the same, like in total cumulative reach. So if my goal is to test a diversified set of content, I'm going to use these assets in paid. I'm probably going to want more of a micro nano strategy.
Hmm.
If my goal is to have a moment on social and really drum up interest, you can't replace the true influence that some of these bigger creators have. If Jake Paul, Logan Paul, if they talk about something, post about something, that's going to have significantly more effect in the marketplace than a smaller group of 20,000 creators. Even if you put 50 of them together, that's still nothing compared to some of these mega people.
Yeah, and my kid loves Prime. He watches YouTube,
Yeah. Right.
and he is sold on Prime, not Gatorade, but Prime, because of the campaign that dude did, and it has worked. It's weight in gold. Like, his brand loyalty to that soft drink is incredible.
It's absolutely insane. I would have never thought, if you were to tell me that Gatorade should be worried about their market share 5-10 years ago, I'd be like, how? That doesn't
Yeah.
even make sense. So I think it goes to show the power of what these creators can do when they're attached to also a well-oiled sort of machine of a business.
Yeah, and that brings up another interesting point and a very difficult way to answer, or question to answer. But like, with Prime, like, for example, my kid watched YouTube videos, saw Prime and Logan Paul brothers like going after it, right, and like
Yeah.
really pushing this somewhere, and he will buy nothing but Prime, and we've spent hundreds of dollars on Prime and as a household, but like, there is no realistic way to measure that from the marketing campaign side.
Yeah.
So how do you articulate that to a brand of this is what it's going to equate to in the future?
I think it's difficult. I think it's super difficult. I mean, that's a really good example of how like social metrics and traditional media metrics need to also have some like financial metrics in there, and you need to look at a timeline of whether it's 3 6 months or 12 months kind of thing, where there is this time aspect of like, how do you, I hate this word, it's not the right one, but like infiltrate a community of people, in this case like Gen Z, kids who want a drink kind of thing.
Hmm.
um, and I think whatever it is like, you need to make your mind up of what are we looking at in terms of being a sign of growth, and then how do we track that ourselves throughout that timeline. And I mean, engagement rate is obviously not the right one, but it needs to be some mix of like an acquisition cost mixed with like a lifetime value. I think we're seeing more people talking about that, especially in the e-com space of LTV. So over time, how can we get customers and then keep them
Yeah.
for a longer period of time?
And a physical product like that that's sold in a grocery store, like, there's no way to represent a lifetime value. So how do you know it's working? Man, that
Yeah.
is way beyond my
There's
intelligence level in this space.
there's some proxies in terms of like, we used to use social listening tools to measure share of voice in the marketplace for a brand like Samsung, right? So like Samsung compared to Whirlpool, compared to GE, compared to um, what's it, Maytag. Like out of all of the conversation around washing machines, which brands are mentioned the most on, at this time it was Twitter. And so we had a good idea like week over week, where there are changes, what was driving those conversation spikes. Usually it was negative conversation. So it's like, do you really want a lot of brand like share of voice in this space? I don't know. So I think there's a couple ways that you can create proxies.
Hmm. All right. Good call. Uh, Kind of an oddball question, but like, what do you think a brand should be having for a budget when it comes to influencer marketing?
Minimum $1 million. No, no, I'm totally kidding. You know, I again, it depends. I've worked with brands where they were like, we don't want to spend a dime on paying creators, but we want to create community around a store opening.
Okay.
And for them, it worked because their product was fairly expensive. It was $1,000 jacket. for different like outdoors athlete type people. So very specific market, really interesting. And it was a compelling offer for some creators of like, we don't expect you to post. We'd love it if you do, but here's a free jacket if you're interested, and we'd love to get you into the store and do a fitting, so on and so forth. And I was thoroughly surprised at the amount of creators that were super down for something like that.
Hmm.
Now, when the product was something else, could be fun, could be a great product, cookies or something like that, people are a little less inclined to, work for free. So I don't know. I'd be curious to understand, how much are you spending on programmatic? How much are you spending on out of home? How much are you spending on print and even just like the production of those things? And would you want to try shifting some of that budget into testing a small group of creators to see what your process could be like?
That's a great way of going about it, and asking, putting the ball back in their court of like, hey, is there any other budget that you're spending right now that you don't see an incredible return on investment, that you would want to reallocate that budget to somewhere to test, that to like possibly come up with a real winner here.
Yeah.
Love that
Yeah.
idea.
And this obviously falls into your world, but affiliate is a really good sort of dip your toe in the space, because I'm not super familiar with all the costs associated with setting that up, but it seems much more digestible than, hey, we're going to pay 20 creators cumulative $50,000
Mhm.
over 3 months kind of thing.
Yeah, affiliate's a long game, and you're in you're setting up a budget for the first 6 months to not make money, essentially.
Yeah.
And but once you do, like in 12 months, you might be making 10% or even 20% more revenue than you are making today. And that's a good deal. And that's the way it resonates with the folks that are making those decisions.
Yeah, totally. And I, I think we all face this idea of like, hey, we need to test this in order for us to know if it'll work.
Hmm.
That test requires upfront money or budget in some way. And as a quote unquote salesperson, it's always an interesting conversation to be like, hey, let's test this. Can I have some money, please? And they're like, what do you mean you're going to use my money to test this? Shouldn't this work? But there really is an aspect of, we need to know what specifically works for you. Um, and so
Right.
that's just a common, I think,
Tough
marketers.
conversation sometime to ask for that $5,000 a month like budget for exploring new opportunities. But
Absolutely.
it's a must do. And speaking of affiliate, we're gonna thank my sponsor today, and that is affiliate.com. Some clacking you've got going on there.
Yeah, there we
uh,
go.
affiliate.com streamlines the entire affiliate marketing process by connecting publishers, merchants, and affiliate networks on a unified platform. Publishers no longer need to log into multiple networks, struggle to find offers, and worry about dead links. Affiliate.com has you covered, providing single searchable database of over 1 billion products to manage and power affiliate commerce content. Publishers easily find and promote relevant offers across dozens of networks, all while gaining valuable insight. If you are a publisher out there, go check this out. It is such an easy JavaScript functionality on your WordPress site. It is absolute magic, and I can't believe how much time it saved me in creating call to actions for my blog posts. So go see it yourself. Go to dustinhouse.com/acom and please support my content making habits here over at Affiliate Nerd Out. And getting back into it, Sam, influencers and creators, how do you go about owning, monetizing, and catalyzing your what is catalyze? I don't even know that word.
Catalyze. That's a good one. I don't know. Well, how do you build up? How do you generate? But I think the real question is, how do you gain a little bit more control and have some longevity with this audience and not be super reliant on the channels that got you there? And there's a couple ways to do that. I think the thing that's had a giant resurgence in the last couple of years, which isn't a new thing at all, is the idea of newsletters.
Okay.
I think, as there's some issues there in terms of like inbox clutter in people's emails, but it seems like newsletters has been the best way for creators to take their audience, give them a place to show up and add additional value for them to keep engaging with. Now they own the data in terms of
Right.
emails, phone numbers, which is always a positive thing. To me, the next step out of that is what do you do with that data and what is that value? And there's a couple different ways that they could use it. I see someone affiliate is a great way to own the audience, and that's kind of hand in hand with the newsletter aspect of how do you create exclusive deals for the people in this sort of community. So I think that to me is step one. The sort of pie in the sky is how do you as a creator have your own brand, whether it's built around your personal image or there's a product that you create or build and so on and so forth. I think there's a couple ways that you could do that.
Gotcha. And Kristen Big Time Evans just mentioned like collecting a phone number to text them. That seems um new to me. I've never gone that route. Have you ever gone that route with any of your influencers?
We're actually testing a couple things out. I know a big tool that is used more socially than like really in a business sense, but is Partyful, which is like just a really easy way to organize events and have people sign up for them.
Hmm.
So one of the creators that I'm working with, he's been doing some like workout events and using Partyful to for people to sign up, and we're seeing what we could do in terms of generating like content from there, some information and data on these people. We're not using people's phone numbers to then sell anything, but it's more of social proof to be like, we're going to put up an event. We can drive X amount of people. Do you, brand, want to be a part of this?
Yeah, that's smart. Love it. Put it in
Yeah,
their court and see what happens. Um,
exactly.
what are some of those steps that influencers and creators can do to generally like figure out their worth? If I were to go out and say, hey, this person has 10,000 influencers, really good engagement, they're worth X amount of dollars in a sponsorship for one video. How do they create that value proposition for brands?
It sounds like you're hinting at leverage
Okay.
and positioning. No, I think it's really tough for creators to build leverage in these conversations. A lot of the time, the brands have all the leverage, or the agencies do, because they're holding the wallet, they're holding this brand
Hmm.
campaign, and that's how we get paid. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. There's two ways I like to think about this. One, if you're a creator, I think you can create leverage by having interesting things or proven things that you've done in the past coming up. And now you're proactively sharing with the brand, hey, I have these 5 sort of content plays coming up. Do you
Yeah.
feel like any of these would be a seamless integration for what you're doing? Or one extra than that is, we noticed that you've done this type of content before, brand. Did you know we have 5 different events that's kind of hit this similar market or similar thing in a way? Would you like to be a part of it? And we'd love to talk about it. So that's, I think, having interesting stuff going in your world is one really good way to have leverage in these conversations and build some kind of urgency. Then we're talking about pricing. How much should you be pricing for your different sort of scopes? For us, we like to build every scope relatively custom. Yes, we
Yeah.
have certain prices for each, a reel, a TikTok, but the specifics of that are constantly changing. What's the usage? What's the exclusivity? What does the creative brief look like? What's your approval process? What's the brand? Like, is this something that we love? Is this something that, we never really thought about before? All of these factors go into pricing, and I think need to be considered, need to be ironed out with whoever you're talking about, that so that all those things are clear. Um, the last piece of that is like to really understand your prices, like try it out, go to market and throw some pricing out and see what happens. Um, I, I have an idea what will happen based off of my conversations, but that whole back and forth, that dance, that negotiation has been an interesting one to figure out for sure.
Oh, awesome. Looks like Big Time Evans over here is trying to backtrack. She didn't mean tag, she meant test. That's hilarious. Maybe you're revolutionizing things with keyword typos. Catalyst
It
is
still made sense.
to start and take off. Thank you for that, for that, Kristen. Appreciate you like chiming in here today. You were active. Awesome. Um, and what about influencers? What steps can they take? When I work with influencers, I'm always preaching media kit because that's exactly what I
Mm,
ask for when an influencer comes to us and says, "Hey, we want to work with you. Hey, what are your options?" Like, is that one of those first things that you do with your the players you're working with?
Absolutely. It's like what you have to create the space for brands and agencies to see where can they show up. So it's not as cut and dry necessarily as a pre-roll or post-roll or mid-roll type thing, but I think using that as a guide of how you want to work with sponsorships or brand partnerships is super important. How you communicate that, whether it's a media kit or a different way, I think that's totally up to you. But I'd be curious to learn like what are the things that you want to see in that media kit, and what are you
Mhm.
looking for?
I definitely want to see your numbers in
Yeah.
terms of followers and reach, and in each channel, like segmented. I want to see the engagement rates. I want to see the demographics that you're holding. I want to see a case study with any brands that you've done in the past. So,
Yep.
in my mind, a media kit is going to be around 3 pages. The first is value proposition and the problem they're solving.
Mm,
Second is going to be case studies, and then the third is going to be our pricing metrics of like what you can expect for this price point and what we're going to be doing in the deliverables.
interesting. No, that's super helpful to hear because I typically don't include pricing on the media kits, which
Okay.
probably probably makes my process slower in
Yep.
terms of like spraying and praying and just sending that out to as many people and giving them the information to make a decision. That I think would be quicker. And the reason I don't typically share rates is because again, those can be different or changed depending on who we're talking to and what the scope really calls for. But I often question like, should there be pricing on it? Because if it
Hmm.
has value and telling both communicating like, hey, we're in the same stadium. We at least should be having this conversation.
Right. And you don't want to undershoot it either. Like if you're just offering something for $500 that they would have paid 5,000 for, like you just shot yourself in the foot, right?
Correct.
But I think it's a really good standpoint and a good precedent to make like decisions. If I get that media kit and I see the prices, I'm like, hey, we're in the ballpark. Now I just need to negotiate and get to the right place.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
all right, and switching gears into like tools, you've got to be using some that you work with personally and for your clients, or like suggesting to the influencers out there to use. Can you talk about some of those like must have and like nice to have tools?
Yeah. Absolutely. So when it comes to the management side of things with working with creators, you mentioned one with media kits. There's
Okay.
also a couple of different processes involved with like whitelisting content and that whole process of
Hmm.
how do you connect the backends. Payment is another big one for creators of how do we get payments?
Okay.
You need to send invoices. It's usually a net. If you're lucky, it's a net 30, but usually you're dealing with like a net 60 type deal. So it
Okay.
requires a bunch of follow up. There's a couple companies in that space in tech that I think is doing a really good job. One of them being July. July, they create. It's essentially like they create your one sheets for your creators or your media kits, but they also provide a bunch of data in terms of like helping you analyze will this be a good partnership. So
Hmm.
I think that's a really good one. It's definitely a nice to have as a creator. And there's also companies like Lumanu, which I think make the payment process and the whitelisting process a bit easier as well. I'm seeing more and more of these payment sort of platforms pop up too, of like get paid today instead of waiting the net 30 for 1% kind of thing. um, we haven't implemented any of those things. We're lucky to have partners so far that have paid on time, and that's always really good. And it's also my job to hunt those down. So that's certainly a lot of my time. Um, I think a really important investment is what tech are you going to use to measure your influencer campaigns? And that again depends on your goals. Something like a creator IQ might be good for like general campaign management. You want to
Hmm.
see engagement rate, you want a one place, but it's expensive. So I think that's one thing to balance. A company like Super Affiliate, I think, does really well for e-commerce D2C brands where they essentially create like the shoppable places, a storefront, a storefront for creators, but it's for the brand to implement in their campaigns. and it creates a really good landing page. It's very trackable in terms of results. So if acquisition is your number one thing and you're looking at affiliate partners, I think Super Affiliate's a really good one, and they've been working with some really cool brands.
Really good call there. I like their technology and what they're doing. Working with a company called Inflection that is going right down that same route that is fantastic. And then one of our sponsors, Markable, I think is an incredible tool for the influencer space here today and
Hmm.
helping move. I just love seeing tools that are helping move this industry in the right direction and help automate some of the processes that have traditionally held back from letting influencers and affiliates make more money. And I love this kind of technology that's coming out. A couple of great tools that you mentioned there, and we're getting a lot of comments in here real quick. We'll shut down. Some LinkedIn user on your end said, I agree, media kits are not price sheets. All right. We got
Hmm.
one vote for your methodology there.
Let's
Uh,
go.
hey, Kristen Big Time Evans says, I found value in adding pricing with a minimum spend required with a goal of building out a 6-month plus relationship. Great call. Great
I
call.
like
Love
that.
that.
I like that.
And Robert Sherman, Superfiliate is really robust. Love it.
Yeah.
Um,
Great team over there.
yeah, awesome. They were on the podcast some time back, but
Oh, cool.
had a great conversation with their guys there. All right, now it is time for you to defend your post as we wind down here. So this is where I grab something from your LinkedIn profile and we talk
Uh-oh.
about it. It says, I might ruffle some feathers here. Always a great start with my opinion, but the P word is a trap. The P word, of course, meaning perpetuity. Defend yourself. Tell me what your meaning here is.
Yeah. So this was on the back end of speaking and talking about UGC or CGC, creator generated content. And we're
Okay.
seeing a huge number of UGC specific agencies and other agencies where they're creating content for the brands, and in the contracts, and often not communicated up front, there's a little line that says the brand will have a license to use this content in perpetuity.
Mm,
Now, if this content doesn't have your face or your name in it, or it's just your hands, perhaps that's maybe a different discussion. But if this is content and I'm talking to the camera and I'm giving my opinions and saying, well, you should do this or you should take this pill and everything will be all right, perpetuity is the enemy, because
mm.
what happens, they pay a rate, they pay a certain fee, you give them this content, it feels great, you just made $1,000 off of one video, fantastic. But then you're featured on The Bachelor next year and you have a million brands coming your way asking you for $1 million deal or a big deal, and now all of a sudden this brand over here still has your asset and they can use it in perpetuity across all platforms, and next thing you know, you're walking into Target and your face is right above, like,
Yikes.
something that you didn't co-sign. And so I don't think that there's enough protection for these creators in that way when it comes to licensing their content and their name, image, likeness. So as a manager, I'm hyper focused on that.
Mm.
At the same time, I don't see what the value is in wanting to get perpetuity in content. Like, why not make it 5 years? Like, you're not going to be using this content for more than 3 months or a year, at the most,
It's
maybe a
gonna get
year.
old quickly, yeah. Unless they do blow up, just like you said, and they can like revisit and put that up later
I'm
on down
wait
the road once they're famous.
I'm waiting for the ad campaign to be like, creators we worked with 10 years ago and we still have access, we still have the perpetuity on this, so like, here's this set of content that we're bringing back from 20
Yeah.
years ago, kind of thing.
All right. Two questions in that sense.
Yeah.
One, I have heard if you're going to allow a brand to utilize your content and repurpose it for their own campaigns, you should be charging them 10x or 5x what your normal rates are for just doing it to your channel. Is that about right?
I'd have to double check on those numbers specifically, but it's definitely an upcharge, and we want to
Okay.
get as specific as possible. What channel, how are you going to be using it, and what's the timeline?
Okay. And your timelines, you really push for maybe 3 6 months.
We typically start with like a 30. I think it's smart on all ends to start with a 30-day test. Like, don't you want to see if this content works for you if you're going to pay for it? And
Yeah.
then the way a brand can really win here is like you pre-negotiate what an extension would look like.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, that's our time. How do we connect with you?
Please feel free to hit me on LinkedIn. I'm always down to talk about these things, or shoot me an email at sam@crowdworkmedia.com.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Really appreciate your knowledge drops today. Thanks for your time. And for all those folks out there, keep on recruiting, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you so much.